being the observer of your thoughts. That's why you can't be your thoughts. You are the observer. That's where you start. You can watch a movie, but you'll never play those parts. You listen to a song and it can really touch your heart. Keep being the observer. That is your part. When you get a whiff, you'll feel a shift, and you can live. Feel the peace in the space you create, and let your awareness drift.
Welcome to week 5. I'm going to start with what might sound like an absurd proposition. Your resistance to reality is the only problem you actually have. Not your circumstances, not what's happening, not what happened in your past, or what might happen in your future. Your resistance to what is. Think about it. When you're fully accepting what's happening, even if it's difficult, are you suffering or are you just dealing with it? The suffering comes from the layer of this shouldn't be happening that you add on top of what's actually happening. Someone criticizes you, that's just information. But you add, they shouldn't have said that. They're wrong. I need to defend myself. Now you're suffering. You make a mistake, that's just what happened. But you add, I shouldn't have done that. I'm stupid. I'm a failure. Now you're suffering. This week, we're exploring what might be the most counterintuitive practice in consciousness work: surrender, non-resistance, opening to what is, rather than fighting reality. And I know what some of you are thinking. If I stop resisting, won't I just become passive, a doormat? How will anything change? Great questions. We're going to address all of that. Because here's the paradox we're going to explore. The more you resist reality, the less power you have to change it. The more you accept reality, the more capacity you have to respond effectively. Acceptance is really the big clue here. What surrender actually means. Let's start by clarifying what we mean by surrender, because this word gets misunderstood constantly. Surrender does not mean passivity or resignation, letting people walk all over you, giving up on your goals, becoming a victim, spiritual bypassing. It's all perfect, so I don't need to do anything. Surrender means accepting reality as it is in this moment, releasing your demand that reality be different than it is, opening to what's happening rather than contracting against it, working with life rather than fighting it. Think of it this way. You're in a river. The current is flowing. You can thrash against the current, exhausting yourself while going nowhere. Or you can surrender to the current, conserve your energy, and actually have the capacity to navigate toward where you want to go. Surrender is not giving up. It's giving up the struggle with what is, so you can respond effectively to what is. Michael Singer's experiment, very interesting. Michael Singer, in his book, The Surrender Experiment, describes his journey of letting go of personal preferences and simply allowing life to unfold. After a profound spiritual awakening in his 20s, he made a radical decision. He would no longer let his personal fears and desires dictate his life, but would simply surrender to what life presented. Singer describes surrender as done in 2 distinct steps. First, let go of this personal reactions of like and dislike that form inside your mind and heart. And second, with that resultant clarity, simply look to see what is being asked of you by the situation unfolding. Now, I want to be honest about something. Singer's story is extraordinary. He went from being a solitary yogi living in the woods to founding a billion-dollar medical software company, all by surrendering to what life presented rather than following his personal preferences. And that can sound unrealistic. Like, sure, it worked for him, but what about me? Fair enough. Not everyone's surrender experiment will lead to founding a billion-dollar company. And that's not the point. The point is, Singer found that he actually got more peaceful inside as he dealt with the ever-increasing magnitude of challenges. And life was molding him each day to become who he needed to be. The external outcomes varied, but the internal result, freedom, peace, aliveness, that's what surrender offers, and that's available to anyone. Now let's talk about what resistance actually costs you. Energy depletion. Resisting reality takes enormous energy. All day, every day, you're fighting with what is. This traffic shouldn't be here. They shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't feel this way. That's exhausting. Just thinking about it is exhausting. Impaired judgment. When you're busy resisting, you can't see clearly. Your perception is distorted by your demand that things be different. So you make poor decisions. You miss opportunities and you misread situations. Suffering. We already covered this, but it bears repeating. The resistance layer is where most of your psychological suffering lives. The actual circumstances might be challenging, but it's your resistance to it that creates the suffering. Disconnection. When you're resisting life, you're not present with life. You're fighting it. So you miss it. You miss the moments, the connections, the aliveness of being here. And here's what's wild. Most of what you resist, you can't actually change anyway. You can't change that it's raining. You can't change what already happened. You can't change what somebody else said or did. You can't change how you feel in this moment. So all that resistance is just being wasted energy fighting battles you can't win. Let's talk about the yes practice. All right, here's the fundamental practice of non-resistance. Say yes to reality. Not in words, in your energy, in your body, in your being. When something happens, your habitual response is probably some version of no, contraction, resistance. This shouldn't be happening. The practice is to catch that no and consciously shift to yes. Yes, this is what's happening right now. Yes, this is what I'm feeling right now. Yes, this is the situation I'm in right now. Notice you're not saying yes to it continuing. You're not saying you like it. You're not saying you won't work to change it. You're just acknowledging this is what is right now. And the question is, what happens when you say yes? First, your system relaxes. When you stop fighting reality, your nervous system calms. The contraction releases. You can breathe again. Second, you can see more clearly. Without the distortion of resistance, you can actually perceive what's happening and what's needed. Third, you have more energy available. Energy that was going into resistance is now available for creative response. Fourth, solutions often appear naturally. When you're not busy resisting, intelligence emerges. You see options you couldn't see before. And here's the really interesting part. Things often shift on their own when you stop resisting them. Try it. I don't fully understand why this happens, but I've seen it hundreds of times. Someone accepts what they've been resisting, really accepts it, not just intellectually, but energetically. And within days or weeks, the situation transforms. Maybe it's because your energy shifts and that affects how others respond to you. Maybe it's because you're no longer unconsciously perpetuating the pattern. Maybe there's something more mysterious going on. I don't need to know why. I just know it works. Now here's a critical distinction. Surrendering is not the same as suppressing. Suppression is pushing something down, pretending it's not there, bypassing your actual feelings. Surrender is opening to what's actually there, feeling it fully, not resisting it. If you're angry, surrender doesn't mean pretending you're not angry. It means, yes, anger is present. Let me feel this fully without resistance or judgment. If you're afraid, surrender doesn't mean forcing yourself to be brave. It means, yes, fear is here. Let me allow this fear without contracting against it. The irony is, when you fully allow the emotion without resistance, it moves through you much faster. When you resist, it gets stuck. Here's where people get confused. If I surrender to what is, how do I ever change anything? How do I pursue goals, take action? Great question. Here's the answer. You can accept reality as it is right now and work toward a different future. There's no contradictory. In fact, accepting reality is how you create the conditions for effective change. Example, okay? You're in debt. You can resist this reality. I shouldn't be in debt. This is terrible. I'm such a failure, which keeps you in stress and prevents clear thinking. Or you can accept it. Okay, I'm in debt. This is the current reality. From that acceptance, you can calmly assess the situation and make a plan. Acceptance doesn't mean you want to stay in debt. It means you're not wasting energy fighting the fact that you're currently in debt. Singer describes it as honoring and respecting the enormity of what appears rather than immediately judging whether you like it or not. There are two ways to move through life, force and flow. Force is pushing against reality, making things happen through sheer willpower, controlling outcomes, forcing yourself and others, exhausting. Flow is moving with reality, allowing things to unfold, responding rather than controlling, cooperating with life, sustainable. Most people default to force because flow feels risky. It feels like losing control. But here's what I've learned. The sense of control you get from force is largely an illusion. You can't actually control most of what happens. You can influence some things, yes, but control, that's mostly a fantasy. And the energy you spend trying to control everything, that's energy you could be using actually to respond creatively to what's happening. You know this experience already. You've had moments of flow, maybe in creative work, in athletic performance, in intimate connection, in nature. Times when you weren't trying to control anything. You were just responding, present, alive, and everything felt effortless. That's what becomes available when you stop forcing and start flowing. Athletes call it being in the zone. Musicians call it being in the groove. Psychologists call it flow state. I'm suggesting you could live from that place more of the time. Not through effort, but through surrender. Now here's where we get into territory that might make some of you uncomfortable. Surrendering to life requires some trust that life knows what it's doing. I get it. That's a big ask. Especially if life has been harsh to you. Especially if you've experienced trauma, loss, betrayal. So let me be clear. I'm not suggesting everything that happens is meant to be or for your highest good in some cosmic sense. I don't know about that. I'm not making metaphysical claims about the universe's intentions. What I'm saying is more practical. Your resistance to what already happened doesn't help. Your acceptance of what is does help. Whatever your beliefs about why things happen, the question is, are you better off fighting with reality or working with it? As Singer put it, am I better off making up an alternate reality in my mind and then fighting with reality to make it be my way, or am I better off letting go of what I want and serving the same forces of reality that managed to create the entire universe around me? When you practice surrender consistently, something shifts. I like shifting. You start to sense what's being asked of you, not by some external authority, but by the situation itself. Life presents something. You let go of your immediate like it, don't like it reaction. You open. And in that openness, you can sense what's actually needed here. Sometimes what's needed is action. Sometimes it's patience. Sometimes it's speaking up. Sometimes it's letting go. You can't know what's needed when you're busy resisting, fighting. You can only know when you're open. Now, frequently asked questions. Frequently asked question number 1, isn't this just spiritual bypassing? Using surrender to avoid dealing with real problems? It absolutely can be, and that's a corruption of genuine surrender. Spiritual bypassing is using spiritual concepts to avoid uncomfortable emotions or situations. It's all perfect. Everything happens for a reason. Just surrender and it'll all work out. That's not what I'm teaching. Genuine surrender means opening to what's actually here, including the uncomfortable, the painful, the challenging. It means feeling your anger, your grief, your fear fully, rather than bypassing it. And it doesn't mean you avoid taking action when action is needed. Sometimes what surrender reveals is you need to leave this relationship. You need to set this boundary. You need to get professional help. If you're using surrender to avoid necessary action or to suppress genuine feelings, that's not surrender. That's avoidance. Frequently asked question number 2. What about injustice? Am I supposed to just surrender to systemic oppression or abuse? Absolutely not. Surrendering to reality doesn't mean accepting injustice. It means accepting that injustice exists right now, so you can respond to it effectively. If you're so busy being outraged that it shouldn't exist, you're stuck. When you accept that it does exist, you can channel your energy into actually changing it. The most effective activists, the people who create real change, are often the ones who've deeply accepted the reality of what they're fighting against. They're not stuck in this shouldn't be. They're in this is, and here's what we're going to do about it. Surrender gives you power. It doesn't take it away. Frequently asked question number 3. I tried surrendering to my chronic anxiety and it just got worse. What am I doing wrong? You're probably trying to surrender to the anxiety going away, not to the anxiety being there. This is a subtle but crucial distinction. Real surrender means, yes, anxiety is here right now. I'm not going to fight it or try to make it go away. I'm just going to allow it to be here. Everything has a life, even anxiety. So it'll come and it'll go. If you're surrendering while secretly hoping the anxiety will disappear, that's not surrender. That's a strategy to get rid of anxiety, which means you're still resisting it. Genuine surrender is not a technique to make uncomfortable things go away. It's opening to them being here. And paradoxically, that's often what allows them to move. Frequently asked question number 4. How do I know when to surrender and when to fight? Good question. Here's how I distinguish. Fight external circumstances that need changing, and you have the capacity to change. Surrender to inner experience, your thoughts, feelings, and sensations. Fight injustice, oppression, harm to yourself or others, when fighting serves genuine change. Surrender to things you can't control, things that already happened, things that are beyond your influence, and always surrender to the present moment. Accept this moment as it is. From that acceptance, choose your response. Frequently asked question number 5. This sounds exhausting. Do I have to surrender to everything all the time? You don't have to do anything. This is practice, not perfection. You'll resist things. Everyone does, including me. The practice is notice when you're resisting. When you catch it, see if you can soften. Just a little, just 1% less resistance. Doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to happen overnight. Over time, surrender becomes more natural, but it's never about being perfect at it. It's about the general direction of opening rather than closing, allowing rather than fighting. We don't know really what perfection looks like. Here's what I want you to understand as we close. Surrender is not a weakness. It's the ultimate strength. It takes tremendous courage to open to reality as it is, rather than insisting it to be different. You can't hide at that point. It takes deep trust to release control and allow life to move through you. But that courage and trust, they're what set you free. Now, this week's assignments. Daily practice. Morning, 10 minutes of surrender meditation. Guided audio is provided. Throughout the day, the yes practice. Catch resistance. Consciously say yes to what is. In the evening reflection, reflect on what you resisted and what happened when you surrendered, if you could surrender, or that you were practicing surrender. There's a shift even in the thought of practicing surrender. The one-day experiment. Choose one day this week to practice radical surrender. Say yes to everything that happens. Doesn't mean you do everything as, just that you accept what is. Resistance. I want you to log it. Track what you resist most frequently. Notice patterns. What are you most unwilling to accept? And then there's a flow experiment. In one area of your life, practice moving from force to flow. Notice what shifts. This week will challenge you. Surrender goes against everything your ego wants to do. Your ego wants to control, wants to defend, and resist. So expect resistance to the practice of non-resistance. That's normal. Just keep practicing. Every moment you can say yes instead of no, you're creating more freedom, more space, more aliveness. So I'll see you next week, where we'll explore transcending personal boundaries and expanding beyond the small self. So until then, ciao.
Being the observer of your thoughts, that's why you can't be your thoughts. You are the observer, that's where you start. You can watch a movie, but you'll never play those parts. You listen to a song and it can really touch your heart. Keep being the observer, that is your part. When you get a whiff, you'll feel a shift, and you can live. Feel the peace in the space you create, and let your awareness drift. Like waves upon the shore, they come and go. These thoughts arise and then they flow. Step back and watch the mind's sweet show. In stillness lies the deepest truth. Beyond the mind there's living proof that peace resides in letting loose. Just breathe and be, that's all it takes. Watch as each thought gently breaks. In silent wisdom awareness waits. You can watch a movie, but you'll never play those parts. You listen to a song and it can really touch your heart. Keep being the observer, that is your